Hi, this is Living Saved with Reverend Kerrene. I'm glad you could join us for Lesson 4 as we go along this spiritual journey and learning how to live saved in this world in a manner that would please God. Today, Lesson 4 is going to be in Genesis chapter 15, beginning right there at that very first verse. Sometime later, the Lord spoke to Abram in a vision and said to him, "Do not be afraid, Abram, for I will protect you, and your reward will be great." But Abram replied, "O sovereign Lord, what good are all of your blessings, when I don't even have a son? Since you have given me no children, Eleazar of Damascus, a servant in my household, will inherit all my wealth. You have given me no descendants of my own, so one of my servants will be my heir." Then the Lord said to him, "No, your servant will not be your heir, for you will have a son of your own who will be your heir." Then the Lord took Abram outside and said to him, "Look up into the sky and count the stars, if you can. That's how many descendants you will have." And Abram believed the Lord, and the Lord counted him as righteous because of his faith. Then the Lord said, "I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land as your possession." But Abram replied, "O sovereign Lord, how can I be sure that I will actually possess it?" Then the Lord told him, "Bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon." So Abram presented all these to him and killed them, and he cut each animal down the middle and laid the halves side by side. He did not, however, cut the birds in half. Some vultures, birds, swooped down to eat the carcass, but Abram chased them away. As the sun was going down, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a terrifying darkness came over him. Then the Lord said to Abram, "You can be sure that your descendants will be strangers in a foreign land, where they will be oppressed as slaves for 400 years. But I will punish the nation that enslaves them, and in the end that they will come away with great wealth. As for you, you will die in peace and be buried at a ripe old age. After 4 generations, your descendants will return here to this land, for the sins of the Amorites have not yet warranted their destruction." After the sun went down and darkness fell, Abram saw a smoking firepot and a flaming torch pass between the halves of the carcasses. So the Lord made a covenant with Abram that day and said, "I have given this land to your descendants, all the way from the border of Egypt to the great Euphrates River." We'll stop right there at that 18th verse. There are several things that we could look at, but let's begin just looking at Abram. Because here's a man that came from a very cultured city with a populace of over 250,000 individuals at that point in time, and that's a really large city for that time. But it wasn't just that they had a lot of people. They also had a lot of cultural things. They were intellectual people. They had beautiful homes many that were surrounded by pretty courtyards built 2 and 3 stories high. These were people that were not poor, not nomadic, not people who did not enjoy life. And they were people who worshipped several different gods. And yet here's Abram, a pagan, who hears the voice of God. And what would make Abram stop? I believe it's simply because he had the gods of wood, and he had gods of stone, and he had gods of clay, and he may have had gods of gold or silver. He may have had all of these, and yet all these years none of them had ever spoken to him. And yet here is an unseen God that is speaking with power and with authority that Abram knew immediately. This is not like anything else that I have ever experienced. This has to be real. And because he believed it to be real, and why wouldn't he when none of the other gods had ever said anything, Abram listens. And he packs up his household. He takes his father, his nephew, and his wife, and they leave. They don't leave with nothing. Obviously, they couldn't take their house with them, but they took wealth with them. So they're leaving, and they're going to a place that God has said, I will tell you where to go. In other words, you don't know where to go, Abram, but because I'm telling you to go, just go. And he does that. But many years have passed. Many years have passed, and Abram has accumulated even more wealth. He's not a poor man. He has many things. And he looks around him and he realizes that his age is advancing. And yet he has no son, this heir that has been promised to him by this unseen God. And he looks and he says, well, what good are all the blessings that you've given me? I appreciate the wealth, Lord, but what good is all of that when you haven't given me an heir? You said that you were going to give me an heir, and I have no heir, and I'm not a young man anymore. So my servant, Eleazar of Damascus, he's going to inherit my wealth because I don't have an heir, and you haven't seen fit to give me an heir. This seems to be a very valid question because Abram's been walking and waiting patiently for God to fulfill his word, this God that he left everything that he knew behind for, and it seems as if nothing has happened. So he asks the Lord about this, and the Lord, apparently they're inside because the Lord takes him outside and tells him to look up into the sky. And if you can count the stars in the sky, then Abram, you can count your descendants. Now immediately we would think there are billions and billions of stars in the sky. That's a lot of kids. He's an old man. Even if he had 50 kids, he's not going to get billions and billions of descendants. But God is speaking spiritually. And we who are living saved are the spiritual descendants of Abraham. So when he's speaking to Abraham, he's speaking, or Abram as he's still known, he is speaking of spiritual descendants. So he is promising him, Abram, you don't see them now, and you won't live to see them, but they will be there because of faith. And because God says this, Abram believes God. And because he believes God, and we need to understand when the Bible says Abram had faith, it means that he had active trust, obedience in God. If you ever have the opportunity to sit in my congregations, and I hope that at one point you will have that opportunity, you will find that all of my members know that I suffer from aquaphobia, which means I have a fear of water. I'm the only one in my family that will go to a beach and sit in the parking lot fully clothed with my jeans, my t-shirt, my hat, my shoes, and my socks. That's as close to the water as you're ever going to get me. They also know that if anyone tells you that I have accidentally drowned, that they are to immediately tell the police, no, someone pushed her in, because Reverend Kerrene would never get in that water on her own. I have aquaphobia. Now, I believe, I have complete, total trust that a life preserver will do exactly what it's designed to do. The properties are such that it will keep the individual afloat. It's designed not to allow the wearer of that to sink. I have total trust, faith in the scientists. I have total faith in the scientific principles behind it. I don't trust it to do it for me. I have faith that it can, but I don't trust it to do it for me. I believe if I put it on, I'm going to sink. That's where my trust is. My faith says, yes, it will happen.